Incidentally, there wasn't 24-hour news either. But the problem is you have a plethora of NGOs. You have very, very good ones. You have very, very bad ones. And you have big ones and small ones. And the big ones can be bad and the small ones can be good and vice versa. Generally speaking, in a place like Afghanistan, they cannot get to the places that really need it. So they have to rely on local supply. And there are two dynamics here. And again, funnily enough, they happened in Bosnia as well. There was a lot of press, and who are in the West, about particularly the Bosnians and sometimes the Croats stealing the aid for the fighting forces. Wasn't actually true. But if you're a granny sitting in a surrounded village and your grandson has got a rifle on the mountaintops protecting you, that's where you give the aid to. So that's one dimension. If you feel totally threatened, you make sure that aid goes to the people who you think are defending you. And the second point is, I don't mean to sound arrogant on this, but it probably comes across that way. If you are living in a country that has not known democracy or the welfare state, and the local landowner, the local warlord, the local political chief, rather in the old Roman Empire system of patronage, is the source of everything you're going to get, then you are going to be quite happy with him taking that and deciding who he's going to give it to. The problem is, he'll only give it to his supporters. And so that's the problem the aid is. And the other thing is, they very often forget the situation they're going into. And I'll give you just for an example. I'll give you one from Sarajevo. The crux of the siege in Sarajevo, which incidentally either side could have ended overnight if they'd really wanted to, but it was useful for the Bosnian presidency to believe that the world saw them surrounded. And it was useful for the Serbs to let the world know that they were around Sarajevo, which I didn't understand this until I started talking to Western politicians who tended to be a lot older than me, that Sarajevo had a ring. Grandad fought in the First World War, which started in Sarajevo. Ooh, bother, subliminally, Sarajevo, war started in Sarajevo. And the Serbs knew that. They were sophisticated enough to know that if they held Sarajevo hostage, the most cosmopolitan city in former Yugoslavia, then a lot of the older generation would think, oh, that's where the war started. And I didn't believe it, but it was true. But when all these people wanted to pour into help, big organisations, small organisations, President Izetbegovic turned to General Morial, who was my boss, the UN commander, and said, well, am I supposed to feed all these Europeans who are coming into a starving, besieged city? And of course, you talk to some of these aid agencies, oh yeah, well, they were going to look into a hotel, and then they'd feed themselves from the local cafes. You know, and these were people who were shooting dogs to eat. People who weren't actually taking cover when a howitzer shell landed because they were pulling a fence down for firewood. So, you know, again, forget the intellectual colonialism. That's what I was saying about NGOs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take any more questions, perhaps only most 3 more. Just before you, Joyce, I see if anyone else wants to come for the first time. But if not, yes. In that case, one from Joyce. Yes.
I should love to ask about Pakistan and the Pashtuns and drones and the effect of all those and the DESI and what we get through that. But the question is, if you had your life over again, would you join the army?
I'll answer that one first. Yes, but I would have avoided doing some of the things I did.
But when you're in the army, you do what you're told.
Jein.
Not all of them.
Jein, as the Germans say. Certainly as an officer, you do have far more freedom than people think to actually make your opinion. And if you're in a position where I was, which again without saying too much, you were very often seen, rightly or wrongly, as a person who knew a great deal about that subject. You did get listened to. Your generals listened to you. Politicians, it's a different matter. I won't go through it all again, but I was talking to Lindsay before this happened. When I was moved to the Foreign Office, I very often had to brief senior politicians in that government. It was very frustrating that you could spend 3 weeks with your team finding out everything of the background on the subject, the pros, the cons, all the rest of it. to be cut off 10 minutes after you started your 1 hour briefing,
Yes.
to be told, yes, I know what we're doing. And when you said, but Minister, you haven't heard anything like I've only just introduced the subject. Oh no, got it, thank you very much. It was very frustrating. I'd say no more than that.
Thank you.
But may I just ask the speakers to answer my question? What are we there for?
I'm sorry.
Why are our soldiers there? Because I know, speaking to them, they haven't got the remotest idea.
Well, I thought I had answered that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I feel that there is absolutely no reason. Nobody knows what the war is for. I mean, you know, if you think of the First World War now, nobody really would kind of defend the First World War or even understand what happened. I mean, in terms of, Sarajevo, obviously, but everybody knows that was the immediate trigger, literally, of the war. But it wasn't
the excuse.
It wasn't what the war was about, you know, really. And I think with Afghanistan, it's already absolutely incomprehensible to people what on earth the point of it is. And so, you know, I very much agree with you. I don't think there is a reason. The reason they're still there is because they can't get out. Because after Iraq, to have another defeat like this, so they're like people stuck on a ledge. They can't really go forward and they can't really go back. You know, because for them now to say, well, we were wrong. I mean, although I think it's interesting, if you listen to politicians or anybody else, in the military actually, on television and, you know, on Newsnight or somewhere, virtually the assumption now of all of them is that it's totally that Iraq was a disaster. I mean, they don't put it in those words, but that's obviously what they think. And even with Afghanistan, you can see them thinking, you know, nothing good is going to come of this, really. So, you know, but...
Do you want to...
Very, very quickly, I wasn't consciously avoiding your question, and I perhaps said too glibly that we're there because the politicians want us there, and we're there till the politicians tell us to come out, which is rather like your start off, I suppose. You did ask about Pakistan, and I'm sorry, in a nutshell, although it would take longer than that to really answer it. Pakistan is the reason we went into Afghanistan, to make sure it didn't fall. Pakistan has nuclear weapons.
Yes.
Al-Qaeda with nuclear weapons is something nobody particularly wants to see. So that's the bottom reason why we went into Afghanistan, to make sure Pakistan didn't fall. And it's a ham-fisted way of doing it.
Very ham-fisted.
Yet again, we can't guarantee that it won't fall internally anyway.
And we're creating enemies all the time by drones without killing any of our own people. People in Nevada.
Yes, a programming zone.
It was an English king long ago who said he preferred enemies to friends because they were more reliable, but I'm not sure that's true.
There's a Sicilian mafia man who said, I can look after my enemies, but God protect me.
Be from my friends. That's right. Yeah. That's probably what the Afghans are saying at the moment.
Mark, now Mark had his hand up, but Mark, yes, you are a new questioner.
Yes.
I think I'll go to you.
Yes, well, I just had a thought. I wonder if some of the problems that we find in Afghanistan that have been there for a long time before we even went in, do you think that perhaps some of these problems had its origin in the struggle by the West to get the Soviets out when the Soviets were there? We armed the Mujahideen, we did a lot of things before we even went in, trying to get the Soviets out. Do you think this is part of the origin of the problems with Afghanistan, which has gone on for a long time?
Yes, I mean, you know, as I said earlier, I mean, the Americans backed Bin Laden against, and the Mujahideen against the Soviets. And more broadly, I think the Afghans have suffered from decades now of intervention by outside powers. I mean, it's a fantastically important strategic area, which will become more important with the rise of India and China as, you know, the new economic powers. I mean, so yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think you can't look at any wars with just kind of what happened now or 3 months ago.
Yes.
Hundreds of years, Afghans have been like that. That's why the Great Game started. But I'll pose you a question, and I won't give you an answer to it, but you can think about it. Did we really want the Soviets out Or did we not want to keep them and bleed them dry in an area where they couldn't cause us any problems? I merely pose that as a question to think about.
Interesting. One final question again from you, Mark. I'm sorry,
No, that's fine.
One. Ian.
Yes, I just wondered, I mean, given that I think it's unimaginable that in the near future the politicians are going to make the decision to withdraw, I just wonder whether it looks as if some kind of talks must be the only way forward in the short term, medium term. Just wonder whether either the speakers think there's enough common ground between the competing parties to allow for the possibility of any kind of fruitful exchange of views at all, which might allow for, you know, some sort of move towards a kind of settlement, no matter how unsatisfactory.
Yeah, okay. All counterinsurgencies end in talking, you know, in a political solution at some stage. There's no guarantees which side's going to be on top at the end of that. That's the difficulty. And until they're all negotiating sincerely from whatever motive, you aren't going to get an answer on that. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing I would say is that from the Afghanistan point of view, if you talk to the Taliban and you give power to the Taliban at the moment, then you are giving them the psychological victory of saying, look, we've been here all the time, and finally now we've forced you to the table. And that's the dilemma of playing three-dimensional chess over the telephone. Not a good answer, I'm afraid, but thank God I'm not trying to sort that one out.
Well, I mean, I just think it's not even so much a question of, you know, is there any common ground intellectually, or, you know, I think there is a decision being made that at some stage, whatever emerges post-occupation will involve the Taliban. Now, you know, they've been demonised in, well, I mean, there's many things about them that I don't like at all, but they've been demonised as the big enemy, but actually a future government will include, at least partly, the Taliban. It seems to me it's absolutely inevitable, and their allies, you know. Now, in that situation, as was said, who was it who said it about Vietnam? You know, who's going to be the politician who says to the last soldier who dies in Vietnam, what were you doing it for? This will be, you know, they've been told that this is their enemy, these are terrible people, they're defending democracy, and at some stage, it is already turning round, and that's going to continue. Now, and it makes, in a way, the whole war even worse, doesn't it? Because it's a cynical, and I mean, in a way, it's like with the IRA, that you have a situation where people say, you know, now you have people saying, well, what about my brother was killed 30 years ago, and so on and so forth.
200 years ago.
And there's all these things that people are saying. In a sense, in their own individual way, they're right. Because what